Jake Thompson sat in his room, hunched over his computer screen, lost in the world of his favorite video game. His small apartment was quiet, with only the soft glow of his desk lamp lighting the space. He'd been having a rough day. Work had been boring, and his friends hadn't invited him out. The usual routine. The screen flashed, and he made another move in the game, not even noticing the strange sound that filled the room. A low hum, almost like the buzz of a powerful machine, echoed from somewhere in the corner of the room. Jake paused the game and turned toward the sound. It was faint, but unmistakable. His eyes widened as the hum grew louder, and before he could even think to react, a strange blue light filled the room. The next thing he knew, a figure appeared in front of him, standing in the middle of his room. Jake's heart skipped a beat. There, standing before him, was an alien woman. She was tall and striking, with long silver hair that shimmered like starlight. Her skin was a soft, glowing purple, and her eyes were deep, dark pools of mystery. She wore a shimmering suit, unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Nothing like the sci-fi costumes from movies, more like something out of a dream. Jake froze, wide-eyed, not sure whether he was imagining this. His mouth went dry. Who are you?" he stammered. The woman, seemingly just as confused as he was, took a step back. She looked around the room, scanning the small apartment with curiosity. Her gaze finally settled on Jake, and then, without a word, she spoke in a voice that was both melodic and calm. I appear to have made a mistake," she said, her accent soft and strange. "This is not where I meant to be." Jake blinked. He didn't know what to say. Was this a prank? Some kind of elaborate trick? He was still standing there, dumbstruck, wearing nothing but his towel. The woman looked at him with the same stunned expression, her cheeks turning a light shade of purple. It was then that Jake realized why she was staring at him so intently. He was naked, standing awkwardly in the middle of the room with only a towel wrapped around his waist. I didn't expect company," Jake mumbled, scrambling to grab a nearby t-shirt. He quickly pulled it over his head, still trying to process what was happening. "What the hell is going on? What are you?" The woman stepped closer, studying him. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed the confusion in his face. "I am Zara," she said, her voice calm. "I come from a faraway place. I am a princess. But this is not where I am supposed to be." She looked at the shimmering device in her hand, and it hummed again. "My teleporter malfunctioned. I have no idea how this happened." Jake swallowed hard, still unable to fully grasp the situation. A princess. Teleporter. Wait, you're not from around here, are you? Zara's expression softened. "No, I'm not. I need to fix this. But first, may I ask, who are you?" "I'm Jake," he said, still trying to figure out how to react. "Jake Thompson. This is crazy. You're real, right?" Zara nodded. "I am real, Jake Thompson, and I am very far from home." Just as Jake was about to ask another question, a loud crash from the window interrupted them. Both turned toward the noise. Something was happening outside. Something big. Zara's eyes widened. "This is bad," she whispered. "I need your help." Jake was about to ask what she meant when everything around them suddenly started to shake. Jake's heart raced as the ground shook beneath them. He turned toward Zara, who looked more serious than before. Her eyes scanned the room, quickly assessing their situation. The strange blue light that had brought her here still flickered around the small device in her hand. The hum was louder now, almost like a warning. "I need to leave this place now," Zara said, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. Jake stood frozen, still trying to process the fact that an alien princess had just appeared in his room. "Leave? You mean, like, teleport away? Is that thing going to take you back to wherever you're from?" Zara nodded quickly. "Yes, but there's a problem. My teleporter is damaged. It won't work until I fix it, and I need certain resources to do that. I can't do it alone." Jake blinked. "Resources? What kind of resources?" Zara glanced around the room, then back at him. Her gaze softened for a moment, almost as if she was sizing him up. "I'm from a very advanced civilization," she began. "The HFY Empire. We come from a distant star system, far beyond your world's reach. We are peaceful, but my people are at war with a group of ruthless invaders called the Thray Collective." Jake's mind raced as he processed the new information. He had no idea what she meant by any of this. Saravi. Thray? Was this some kind of elaborate joke? Zara noticed his confusion and continued. "The Thray are dangerous. They've conquered many worlds. My mission was to come to Earth to secure an alliance with your planet, to prevent the Thray from reaching us. But now everything is going wrong." Jake shook his head. "Wait. Slow down. You're saying your people want to make peace with Earth, and you came here to ask for help." Zara nodded again, her expression serious. "Exactly. My father, the king, sent me on this mission to negotiate with your leaders. But the Thray must have found out, and now they are hunting me. They know I am here." Jake took a deep breath, trying to wrap his head around it. "So, wait. Why are they after you? You're a princess, right? What could they want with you?" Zora's eyes darkened, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. "The Thray are not interested in peace. They want to control everything. They would destroy entire civilizations to achieve that goal. And I am the key to stopping them." Jake furrowed his brow. "You? How?" "I am the only one who has access to a device, an ancient artifact, that could stop the Thray from spreading their power across the galaxy," she explained, her voice quiet but firm. "But it's a delicate thing. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could lead to disaster." Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. This wasn't a movie plot. This was real, and it was happening to him. "And you need my help to fix your teleporter and get out of here before these Thray guys show up." Zara nodded. "Yes, the only way to fix my teleporter is with materials that are found only on this planet. I'll need your help to find them, but we must act quickly. The Thray will be here soon." Jake felt a mix of fear and excitement. This was insane, but at the same time, he couldn't back down. He had been thrust into something far bigger than he ever imagined. "Okay," he said, his voice shaky. "What do we do?" Zora looked him in the eyes. "First, we need to get out of here and find shelter. The Thray will send scouts to search for me. If we stay here too long, we'll be caught." Jake nodded, suddenly feeling a rush of adrenaline. The game he had been playing hours ago felt like a distant memory. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. And he was in the middle of it. Zora moved quickly to the window, peeking outside. "It's safer if we stay hidden. Follow my lead, Jake, and stay close." As they made their way to the back door, Jake's thoughts raced. He was about to embark on an adventure he never asked for, but somehow he couldn't help but feel ready. He had no idea what was coming next, but whatever it was going to change his life forever. Jake followed Zora through the back door of his apartment, his heart pounding. He had no idea what he was getting into, but it was clear things were about to get dangerous. Zara, despite the fear in her eyes, moved with purpose, her every step calculated. Jake tried to keep up, but his mind was racing. His world, just a few hours ago, had been filled with video games and ordinary problems. Now he was running through alleyways with an alien princess who was being hunted by a powerful enemy. They reached the street where the night sky was strangely quiet. It was as though the whole city had held its breath. Zara quickly glanced around before pulling Jake down a narrow side street. She didn't speak, but her body language told him everything. She was on edge. The hum of her teleporter device had faded, but there was still an electric tension in the air. Suddenly, a distant noise echoed in the sky. It was low, almost like a growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something massive moving through the air. Zara's eyes widened. "They're here," she whispered. Jake looked up. In the distance, dark shapes appeared in the sky, moving fast and with terrifying precision. They were not birds. They were ships, huge, metallic, and unlike anything Jake had ever seen before. Their designs were sleek and terrifying, with sharp angles that seemed to cut through the air like a knife. The ships moved in formation, methodical and controlled. "Who are they?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "The Thray," Zara answered. "They'll stop at nothing to capture me." Jake's stomach twisted. The ships weren't just passing by. They were coming closer, searching. Zara pulled him into a small alleyway, and they crouched behind a dumpster. Jake could hear his heartbeat in his ears, and he felt a cold sweat on his forehead. The realization hit him like a slap in the face. The fate of an alien world rested on him now. How had he gotten involved in something like this? "They're looking for us," Zora muttered, her voice tense. "If we stay here, we'll be found. We need to move now." Jake nodded, swallowing hard. "Where to?" Zora's eyes flashed with determination. "There's an old hideout, a safe house I can use to contact my people, but we need to avoid detection." The Thray ships were getting closer, and the air was thick with danger. Jake felt a strange sense of urgency flood through him. He was no longer just a guy running from a weird encounter. He was part of something much bigger now, something that could change everything. "Okay," he said, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "Let's go." They sprinted through the alleyways, moving quickly and quietly. Zora led the way, her steps light and sure. Every time they passed a corner, Jake would glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see one of the Thray ships hovering overhead. He knew they weren't far off, and soon they'd be trapped if they didn't find shelter. Just as they turned another corner, a loud noise shattered the night, a booming explosion that sent a shockwave through the street. The ground trembled beneath them, and Jake almost lost his footing. Zara grabbed his arm, pulling him into a nearby building. They crashed through the door and into a dark, abandoned warehouse. The windows were covered, and the only light came from a small, flickering lamp in the corner. Zara collapsed against the wall, her breath shallow. "We're safe for now." Jake took a moment to catch his breath, his mind spinning. What was that? The explosion. "Thray forces," Zara said, her voice tight. "They've already started bombing the city. They're trying to flush me out. We need to act quickly." Jake's mind raced. This wasn't a game. This was real, and the danger was escalating fast. "What do we do now?" Zora looked at him, her expression both urgent and grateful. "We wait for my contact to reach us, but we must remain hidden. The Thray will be searching everywhere. They know I'm here." Jake swallowed hard, his hands trembling. He'd never been involved in anything like this before, nothing even close. And yet, somehow, he was all in. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, he was going to help Zara finish what she had started. The warehouse was dark and quiet, except for the soft hum of Zora's alien device in her hand. Jake's heart was still racing from the explosion, his mind struggling to catch up with everything that had happened. The air was thick with tension, and he could hear his own breath echoing in the silence. Zara stood by the wall, her eyes focused on the dimly lit room. She was trying to stay calm, but Jake could see the worry etched across her face. He had no idea how someone like her, someone so powerful and important, could be so vulnerable. She was a princess, after all. He had trouble wrapping his mind around that. But even royalty couldn't escape the danger of the Thray collective. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. "Are we just waiting here for your contact? How do we know they'll even show up?" Zora glanced over at him, her eyes softening. "They will. I trust them. And right now, they are the only chance we have to stop the Thray." Jake nodded, but he was still uneasy. This whole situation was so far beyond anything he had ever imagined. One moment he was in his room, and the next he was hiding in a dark warehouse with an alien princess, trying to survive an intergalactic war. As if reading his thoughts, Zara spoke again. "You've been brave, Jake. I know this is overwhelming, but you've handled it better than most would." Jake blinked, surprised. "Me? Brave? I'm just trying to keep my head above water here. I didn't ask for any of this." Zara took a step closer to him, her expression serious. "None of us choose the path we are given. You could have run, but you didn't. You've stuck by me, even though you have no idea what you're really involved in. That's something I don't take lightly." Jake felt a rush of warmth in his chest. No one had ever looked at him like that before. Not like he mattered. Not like what he did made a difference. He wasn't just the guy who played video games and went to a boring job anymore. He was part of something bigger. And that made him feel important. "Well, I'm not just going to run off," Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I've got no idea how I'm supposed to help you, but I'm not leaving you to deal with the Thray alone." Zara smiled, her face softening. "I'm glad. You're stronger than you think." The words hit Jake harder than he expected. He had never been the strong one. He was just a regular guy. But somehow, standing there with Zara, he felt like maybe he could be something more. Maybe he wasn't just a bystander in this crazy situation. Maybe he could help. Before he could say anything more, a soft click sounded in the room, followed by a low voice. "Zara." Both Jake and Zara tensed, their heads turning toward the source of the voice. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, cloaked in a dark robe, and wearing a helmet that hid most of their face. They moved with a fluidity that reminded Jake of Zara herself. "This is my contact," Zara said, stepping forward. "They'll help us." The figure nodded, their voice low and gravelly. "The Thray are already on the move. We don't have much time." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Thray were closing in, and they were running out of time. But standing there with Zara, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. As the mysterious figure led them deeper into the hideout, Jake's mind was spinning. How had his life gotten so complicated so fast? But in the back of his mind, something else grew, a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a random guy anymore. He was a part of this fight. And somehow, he had to help save Zora's world. The hidden room was cold, dimly lit by flickering lights that barely illuminated the stone walls. Zara, Jake, and the cloaked figure had descended into an underground safe house, far from the danger above. The figure, who had introduced themselves only as Vox, stood in the corner, watching the door as if expecting someone to burst through at any moment. Jake's mind was still spinning. Every few minutes, he had to remind himself that this was real. Zara wasn't some character from a movie, and the Thray weren't some fictional bad guys. They were here. They were coming for them. And Jake was stuck in the middle of it all. Zara was pacing around the room, looking over a small map of the city. "Vox," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "How much time do we have before the Thray locate us?" Vox turned to her, his eyes hidden beneath his helmet. "Not much. The Thray are efficient. They've already started calming the area. If we don't move soon, they'll surround us. We can't afford to stay in one place for too long." Zara clenched her fists, clearly frustrated. "Then we need to act fast." Jake stepped forward, his heart pounding. "What's the plan? How do we stop them? I'm just a regular guy. I don't even know what to do." Zara glanced at him, her expression softening for a moment. "You're more than you think, Jake. You've already helped more than you know. But now we need to get to the archive, a hidden facility where the device I need to stop the Thray is stored. It's our only chance." Jake's brow furrowed. The archive. And this device. What is it? Vox spoke up, his voice low and serious. "It's an ancient piece of technology from my people. It's a weapon, yes, but it's also a lock. If activated in the right way, it will stop the Thray from advancing. But the Thray know about it. They'll do anything to stop us from getting to it. Zara nodded, her face hardening with determination. Which is why we have to get to the archive before they do. Jake felt a sense of dread creeping up on him. He had never been the type of person to take risks, let alone take part in a battle against an alien force. But here he was, about to embark on a mission that could change everything. He looked at Zara, the alien princess who had brought him into this world, and something clicked in his mind. He had to do this. For her. For the planet. For himself. "What do we need to do?" Jake asked, his voice steady. Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jake saw a deep appreciation in them. "We move quickly. Vox, you know the route." Vox nodded. "Yes, but we need to stay low. The Thray have set up sensors and patrols in every direction. If we're caught, it's over." Jake clenched his fists. He didn't know what kind of sensors Vox was talking about, or how they'd avoid them. But he knew one thing. He couldn't sit around waiting for the Thray to find them. He had to move. "I'll follow your lead," Jake said, determination filling his chest. "Let's get to the archive." The next few hours were a blur. The trio moved silently through dark alleys and abandoned buildings, always staying in the shadows. Vox led the way, keeping them hidden from the Thray's patrols. Every time they had to stop or duck down, Jake's pulse raced, his thoughts constantly on the danger closing in on them. They reached a small, unmarked building in the heart of the city, its exterior looking rundown and forgotten. Vox checked the door before pulling out a small device, which clicked open to reveal a hidden underground passage. "We're close," Vox said in a whisper. As they entered the passage, the air grew colder, and Jake's nerves reached their peak. They were almost there, but Jake knew the hardest part was still ahead. The Thray were relentless. They wouldn't give up easily, and Jake had no idea what would happen once they reached the archive. But whatever it was, he was in this for the long haul. The underground passage was narrow, cold, and filled with an eerie silence. Every step Jake took echoed softly, his feet tapping against the damp stone floor. Zara, walking in front of him, moved with the confidence of someone who had seen danger before. Vox, ever watchful, was a few paces ahead, his hand on his weapon, eyes scanning the darkness around them. Jake could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were on a mission to save not just Zora's people, but the entire world. The Thray were hunting them, and the pressure was unbearable. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was just a regular guy, trying to act like a hero when he didn't know the first thing about fighting aliens. "How much further?" Jake whispered, his voice barely audible in the tight space. Zora glanced over her shoulder, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Not much. We're almost there. The archive is just beyond this tunnel. It's hidden deep underground, protected by layers of security." Jake nodded, trying to calm his nerves, but his thoughts were racing. If they got caught, if the Thray found them, he didn't know what would happen. He had no training, no weapons, just his will to help. He couldn't let them down. Not now. Vox stopped abruptly and held up a hand, signaling for the others to stop. They all froze, the silence growing thicker. After a few tense moments, Vox's voice broke the quiet. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "I'm picking up movement up ahead." Zora's expression darkened. "Thray scouts." Vox nodded. "Most likely. They'd found the tunnel entrance. We need to move. Fast." Without another word, they quickened their pace, the tension thick in the air. Every step felt like it could be their last. Jake's heart was pounding in his chest as they rounded a corner and entered a larger chamber. Ahead, faint lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. But something wasn't right. There were strange, metallic sounds coming from further inside. Jake squinted into the dim light, trying to make sense of it. His breath hitched as the shape of a massive door came into view. "There it is," Zara said, her voice full of both relief and worry. The archive. But as they stepped closer, the door suddenly slammed shut with a loud, grinding noise, trapping them inside the chamber. Jake turned to look at Zora, panic flashing in her eyes. Vox immediately stepped forward, tapping a control panel on the wall. "I can override the security, but it'll take a minute," he said, his voice calm despite the situation. Suddenly, the air filled with a low mechanical hum. Jake looked up, his eyes widening in shock. Above them, hidden in the shadows, several robotic sentries activated, their eyes glowing a bright red. "Great," Jake muttered, his stomach sinking. "More robots." "These aren't just regular robots," Zara said, stepping in front of him. "These are defense units. If they detect any threats, they won't hesitate to attack." Vox continued working on the control panel, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm almost there. Just hold on a little longer." Jake's pulse quickened as the robotic sentries slowly began to descend from the ceiling. Their metal bodies clicked and whirred, their movements sharp and precise. There was no time to waste. The Thray were closing in, and these robots would keep them trapped here if they weren't careful. "We need to fight back," Jake said, desperation creeping into his voice. Zora looked at him with a knowing expression. "I'll handle this. You two focus on the door." Before Jake could react, Zora rushed forward, pulling something from the pouch at her waist. It was a glowing compact weapon, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. She aimed it at the nearest robot, and with a quick burst, a bolt of energy shot out, striking the robot and sending it crashing to the ground. Jake stared, wide-eyed. "Holy! We don't have time for this," Zora said, her voice firm, as she turned back to Vox. "We need to get that door open now." Jake nodded and moved to the control panel, trying to help Vox. He felt useless, but he couldn't give up. He wasn't going to let Zara face this alone. Not after everything she had told him. Not after she had risked everything to come here. Vox's fingers flew over the panel as the robots closed in. "Almost done," he muttered, sweat dripping down his face. The hum of the robots grew louder, and Jake's pulse raced as he glanced nervously at Zora. She was still firing at the sentries, her movements graceful and deadly. But there were more robots. More danger. More threats closing in. Then, with a sharp click, the door to the archive slid open. "Go," Vox shouted. Without thinking, Jake grabbed Zora's hand and pulled her through the doorway. The last thing he saw before the door slammed shut behind them was the glowing red eyes of the robots. They had made it inside, but the danger was far from over. Inside the archive, the air was thick with the hum of ancient technology. The walls were lined with glowing panels and strange symbols Jake couldn't understand, their soft light flickering like a heartbeat. It felt like they had stepped into another world, one far beyond the technology he had known. The door had closed behind them, sealing them in with only a few moments of peace before the real battle began. Jake's chest was still tight from the chaos of the last few minutes. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all focused on one thing: survival. The Thray were coming. They wouldn't wait. He had no idea how long they had before the archive's defenses were breached, but it couldn't be long. Zara, standing at the center of the room, was scanning the walls. Her eyes were sharp, focused, and determined. There was no panic, no hesitation, just the calm of someone who had been through countless battles. "We're in," she said quietly. "Now we need to find the core." Vox, who had been scanning the room with his device, turned to them. "It's here, but we have to hurry. The Thray will know we're inside any second." Jake swallowed. "What's the core? How does it work?" Zara turned to him, her face serious. "The core is the key to activating the weapon. Once we get to it, we can lock the Thray out of the planet's systems, stop their invasion, and end this war. But we have to be quick." Jake nodded, trying to ignore the creeping fear in his gut. They were so close, but it felt like everything was about to fall apart. "Where is it?" Jake asked, his voice steady but urgent. Zora pointed to a large, glowing pillar in the center of the room. It stood taller than both of them, pulsing with a faint, blue light. The base was surrounded by ancient symbols, and in the middle of it, Jake could just make out a small control panel. "That's the core," Zora said, moving toward it. "We need to activate it before the Thray find us." Before they could take another step, the soft sound of boots clicking against the metal floor echoed in the distance. Jake's heart jumped into his throat. "They're here," Vox whispered. The sound grew louder. The Thray were closing in. They had found their way inside. Zara moved quickly to the core, her hands flying over the controls. The air around them seemed to thicken, the tension building with every second. Jake and Vox stood on alert, weapons ready, eyes darting around the room for any sign of the enemy. The door at the far end of the room slid open with a sharp hiss, and the first of the Thray soldiers appeared, their armored forms intimidating in the dim light. They moved with military precision, eyes glowing red as they scanned the room. Zara's voice was low but firm. "Activate it now." Jake's breath caught as he watched Zora, her hands moving faster than he could follow. The Thray soldiers were getting closer. He glanced at Vox, who was preparing to fight, but they knew they didn't have time to hold off an entire army. "Almost there," Zora muttered, her face tense with concentration. Then, with a flash of light, the core hummed to life. The room shook, the floor vibrating beneath their feet as a pulse of energy shot through the walls. The symbols around the core began to glow brightly, illuminating the entire room in a fierce blue light. The Thray soldiers froze, their weapons raised, confused by the sudden surge of power. Zara stepped back, her eyes meeting Jake's for the first time since they entered the room. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "It's done," she said, a small but triumphant smile forming on her lips. But before they could celebrate, the walls around them began to crack. The Thray weren't done yet. More soldiers poured into the room, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. The archive had been activated, but it wasn't enough to stop the enemy. "We need to get out of here," Vox shouted, moving to the side as more Thray soldiers entered, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Zara didn't hesitate. "This way." She pulled Jake and Vox toward a hidden door in the back of the room. They sprinted through the narrow corridor, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. Jake's heart was racing again, but this time there was a sense of finality to it. They had done it. They had activated the core. They had won the first battle. But they weren't out of danger yet. The Thray would keep coming, and they couldn't stop until they had completed their mission. Zara glanced over at Jake, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "We're not done yet," she said, "but we've won the first part." Jake looked back at the closing door, his pulse still racing. He had no idea what was waiting for them outside, but he knew one thing for sure: they weren't giving up.